Training this way meant that I was training with bad technique. Now, here's something I want you to write down. Practice does not make perfect. That's nonsense. Perfect practice makes perfect. Practice makes permanent. If you're new to boxing, in this video, I'm going to tell you what you should work on first and why. Is it speed, strength, or stamina? I'll also tell you what you should not be working on first. And if you stick around to the end of the video, I'll explain to you when and why you should be changing this. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, it does help. Hi, I'm Andy Wake, head coach at Boxercise. Over 29 years, I've taken 1,100 Boxercise courses, training over 18,000 people to do Boxercise myself, and been responsible for the development of 28,000. This is our YouTube channel, I hope you like it. When you're new to boxing, or to any sport in fact, the thing that you should be working on first is good technique. Not just technique, but good technique. This is really hard because fatigue is counterproductive to good technique. I remember when I first began boxing, and these gloves felt like they weighed 10 tons in each hand. I still remember that first session today. And the coach was saying to me, keep your hands up. And all the time my hands are dropping down like this because I was getting tired. So fatigue is the enemy in this case. But how do we improve our stamina? How do we get better stamina without doing more practice? Training this way meant that I was training with bad technique. Now, here's something I want you to write down. Practice does not make perfect. That's nonsense. Perfect practice makes perfect. Practice makes permanent. So we must do perfect practice. So how do we do enough practice that we create a correct motor pattern without engaging fatigue? Well, we do this by a method called blocked practice. You can write that down as well. Blocked practice. We separate our practice into blocks. We do it with good technique, then we have a rest, or we do something else. Then we do some more good technique, then we have a rest. And this is called blocked practice. We put our practices into small blocks. Now let's be really specific. To create a correct motor pattern, let's say the motor pattern of the jab, it takes 300 to 500 repetitions to create that motor pattern. If we have a fault, it can take between 3,000 and 5,000 repetitions to correct that. So it's more important to do it correctly and slowly with good technique than it is to do it quickly or with bad technique, because correcting a fault is so difficult. One thing though, we can't just do 500 repetitions of a jab without getting tired. I mentioned before, after a few minutes, you've got your gloves on, you're throwing your punch, and it feels like they weigh a ton, the hands are dropping, and now you're practicing with bad technique. So what we do, we separate those 300 to 500 repetitions into blocks. How many repetitions then should we do in each block? Well, as many as you can replicate with good technique. I suggest practicing this in a mirror with your coach here on screen, with you here in a mirror, and practice your technique. And as long as your technique matches what your coach is doing, then you can continue. My suggestion is I wouldn't go beyond 25 repetitions there or thereabouts, because you need to refocus your mind, you need to rest, relax, and you can do something else in the meantime. Now this sounds like not too much, but it's a fantastic way to warm up. And if you do your warm up like shadowboxing, just doing it firstly without movement, then you can do it with movement, with good technique once again, but do it slowly and do it correctly. If you're doing 20 to 25 repetitions in a block, it's going to take you somewhere around about 15 blocks before you've got good technique. Now, don't think that that's going to hold you back and you're not going to have good technique and stamina at the same time. If you did this 1 minute every single day as part of your warm-up, within 20 days, within 3 weeks, you will have good technique. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Most good boxers, they practice diligently over many, many years. So don't think that 3 weeks is too long for you to practice. If it's good enough for them, it's good enough for you too. If you're a beginner, follow this advice. It will stand you in good stead later on, I promise. Now we can answer the question, what must we work on first? Write this down. Technique, number 1. Stamina, number 2. These are the things that we must develop before we develop any other aspect of our boxing arsenal. These are more important than speed and power. Believe me, they're more important at this stage. We'll work on them later, and I'll tell you when at the end of the video when you can begin to work on speed and power, but not now. So how do we build stamina? Write this down. We work on F.I.T, fitness, intensity, time, F.I.T. It's a basic principle employed in pretty much most fitness settings, and it works really, really well with boxing. These are our priorities. Use low intensity at first with good technique, but increase the round numbers. Let's say, for example, you're able to do 3 rounds at a low intensity. Just keep a nice, good technique. Let's say you're able to do 3 rounds. Okay, do that 2-3 times this week. Next week, increase to 4. The week after, increase to 5. If you have a bad week, okay, knock it back 1 and then increase again. Don't be despondent that you go back a week. It's not the end of the world. Like I said, this is a marathon, not a sprint. Just keep increasing gradually. Increase the number of rounds before you increase the intensity. When we increase the intensity. Now, let's get this clear. We are not talking about the intensity in terms of how hard you're punching, although this is going to develop, I'll be honest. We're talking about increasing the intensity of your heart rate. I'm going to give you some pointers. Week 1, you should really be able to talk while you're doing your exercise. You should be able to talk quite easily whilst you're doing this. After 3 or 4 weeks, you should be out of breath and only just able to take a breath while you're punching. Let me give you an example. So I'm throwing more punches. I have to take a breath in between throwing my punches. So what we want to do is to work up to the point where we are out of breath and only just able to talk. This means we are just below our aerobic threshold. Now, your heart rate rises in a linear fashion with your breathing rate. This means that using a little bit of science, we can just get our workout rate exactly right. And that's what you should be aiming for. Just out of breath, just able to talk, and to do as many rounds as you can like that, and to increase that. So we're increasing intensity next. Next, we increase the length of the round. So week 1, you might be able to do 3 times 1 minute on the bag. Week 2, you might build this up to 4 times 1 minute on the bag. Week 3, 5 times 1 minute. When you get to 6, increase to 1 minute 30 and go back to 3 rounds. 3 rounds of 1.5 minutes, then increase 4 rounds of 1.5 minutes, then build up to 2 minutes, 3 rounds, 4 rounds, 5 rounds, 6 rounds. Increase week by week in this fashion. Eventually, build up, if you can, to 3 minutes per round. Once we've done this, we're then going to increase the number of sessions that we're going to do. This is all adding to our stamina and our muscular strength and endurance. So, week 1, I suggest 2 sessions per week. After week 4 or 5, we could increase to 3 sessions per week. Time permitting, of course. You may have a full-time job, so it's up to you. Try and work up, if you can, to about 5 days per week. That's ideal. Now let me make something clear. Unless you are a competitive fighter, you don't need to be doing more than 5 times a week. Period. Full stop. There is absolutely no requirement for you to do that. The human body is an adaptive organism and we respond to rest and recovery. Now, unless you have a training age of greater than 2, you shouldn't be training more than 5 days per week. A training age of more than 2 means you've been training for more than 2 years. Let's say you're 15 years old and you've been training for 6 months. You have a training age of 6 months. Let's say you're 60 years old and you've been training for 1 year. You have a training age of 1 year. The training age to go beyond 5 times a week is 2 years. Like I say, my suggestion is, unless you're a competitive fighter, you don't need to be doing that. If you're a competitive fighter, oh yeah, you should be doing more than that. To summarize then, firstly, increase round numbers. Secondly, increase round length, intensity. Thirdly, increase the number of sessions. Going back to the first thing I said that technique is more important than anything else. I want you to write this down and live by this forever, because this is something you're gonna do in your training sessions. Write it down with a pen, stick it on your wall, never lose this bit of paper. Quality before quantity. Do your blocked practice as your warm-up with good technique before you do your workout. It's your warm-up, but it is also your technique reinforcement. Unbelievably important that. I can't stress one thing more than that to any boxer, to any sports person. Practice doing your 15 to 20 repetitions, static. Then do it moving. At no point train beyond fatigue where technique is compromised. Then do your training where you're going to increase your muscular strength and endurance. Press ups, sit ups, skipping, running, all those things. Fantastic for boxers. But get that block practice in first, because that makes the difference. I did promise you at the end of this, I would tell you when and why you should change. Okay. Firstly, why is more important? Well, the human being is an adaptable organism. And what happens is you improve like this to a certain point and then it plateaus like this. You kind of get to a sticking point. Anybody that's ever been on a diet will tell you this. They get to a sticking point. And that's when we change the emphasis of the program. And we change this to speed and power. When does it occur? Well, it depends on a number of factors, but generally after 12 to 16 weeks approximately, assuming there's been no injury during that phase of training. This is called periodization, changing your training phase so that you continue to improve and you don't get reducing gains. I'm going to do that pretty soon. So if you'd like an example of a program like this, click the link below and it will be emailed to you free of charge. You can have it for nothing. It's got blocked practice, it's got the exercises you need to do, and it's even got recommendations of which punches to practice. I'll even link to some videos below that I've done so that you can practice your technique with me, and you can put me on the screen there, you in a mirror here, so that you can make sure that your practice is good practice. I hope you found that video good. It's a question that I get asked so much. If it's helped you, please like and subscribe, and I will do a video on periodization at some point in the near future so that you guys will know when to change, how to change, so that you continue to improve, because we don't want to be static. We want to keep on going. Good luck with your boxing.